Alrighty then, so I thought I'd go ahead and chronicle the teardown of the VXR for purpose of a mini jet boat. So far what I found is you pull all the top off the front, you gain access into the front here, and a lot of wiring right here underneath the steering column, and a lot of connectors. So what I did was just use a numbering system, on all the connectors, and they're probably different. You couldn't plug them in wrong if you wanted to, but then going ahead and writing down, every one and a number both sides of the connector, and where it goes if I know. Also, it appears that the front hatch had a switch, so I assume if the hatch is open, the switch would actually keep it from running, or have some effect on the running functionality of the vehicle. So it looks like a magnetic type switch. It worked with these and ice machines, all kinds of stuff, and HVAC and refrigeration. So that's probably something I'm gonna have to work out in the end. Is find the magnet inside the lid where it latches down, because that's where this was mounted, and somehow tie it to it, just to trick it as being always closed. This is also another component that was in the front inside deck. It was actually mounted up in there on the right side if you're riding the thing. And I'm not sure what it is, something I'll look up, but I'm kind of guessing that it may be some sort of a positioning device that basically tells it if it's upside down in the water, or not real sure, but just the fact that the hatch sensor goes to it, I figure, well, it may be something that is telling the electronics that some sort of restrictive sensor device. But anyway, I'll have to look that one up. If anybody knows, that'd be great, and put it in the comments. I'll try and remember to mention it later if I figure it out. Something else I ran into, there is a steering sensor. It's just like another magnetic switch or positioning type sensor. It's mounted underneath the column. The sensor was screwed in here. Wiring went down to the front of the vehicle and connected into the wiring harness. And of course, right here was the horn. So had an audio horn mounted right here. Something I'll reconnect. No reason not to. Who knows what this thing looks at as far as if it has some sort of code. If the horn's not connected, it probably does. Now I'm taking the handlebars off and the plastic that was around the handlebar and the steering column here. They Loctite these things in, and you can see the Loctite there. Well, at first I didn't know, and these screws on the bottom, they just hold the plastic cowling on. And I was just using a number 2 Phillips and an impact gun to take them out, and I partially stripped out one of them. And I realized, hey, these things are in there tight. I did end up getting them out just with a bigger Phillips tip than a number 2. And it was a little bit shaky, but they came out. With the plastic on it, it was hard to heat the metal, but once I got the plastic off, then these here that held the handlebars on, I went ahead and heated the metal. Came out fairly easy. It was like night and day. So, and these are stainless screws. If you don't know about stainless screws, they're actually a soft metal. They strip easy. Of course, aluminum's softer. So I have no clue that no idea that I'm going to repurpose this. I'm probably going to try not to figure out ways to put this into my own steering system and somehow have a positioning sensor on my steering system. It may just be I'll have to build a bracket off behind the steering wheel, who knows. But then from the handlebars, you know, you had like on one set there was 1 or 2 sets of wires coming down, cables, you know. On the other side there was like 3 or 4. You know, they all come down the front. They plug into the wiring harness that was up here. Right now I've got it mostly pulled up towards the front. It's just laying in here. Let's see. Yeah. So this is kind of your little cluster of connectors that are up front underneath the steering column. You know, and of course you've got, you know, two connectors on your fuel tank gauge setup. I just don't know where the pump is. The wiring going into the, you know, one was obviously going to the dash. It was a fuel level gauge. The other set I was assuming is probably a pump. Haven't pulled it apart yet, so I guess we'll find out. And then of course you got, this here is like a part of the vent system for the fuel tank. So far I haven't seen any sensors associated with that. I don't know if it's necessary to repurpose it. But underneath there you see that little thing with the cap. You know, it goes from the fuel tank to that, and then from that up to this up here. And I assume it's for when, you know, if you go upside down, you know, fuel might go in and catch in that cup, you know, eventually vent out or run, you know, who knows. But it's just a vent for the fuel system, from what I can tell. Other than that, I don't think there was much up front to deal with. Just cutting a bunch of zip ties, disconnecting connectors, you know, and numbering them and keeping a list of what they are. So I'm going to continue on, pull this out. You know, the steering cable is really simple. Just a bracket underneath with the cable connected to it with a typical ball end, you know, removable end cable. And then a bolted on, you know, a lever onto that steering shaft. There's 4 bolts, the bracket comes off, and the rest of it just lifts off. So once I get that done, I'll look around, but it looks like I'm getting pretty clear to actually cut the top off this thing, about down at this level. You know, I don't think I'm going to go all the way up front, just because there's no need to get what I want out. I'm not repurposing the tank. I got 2 aluminum fuel tanks, and actually from RSR they sold me a weld-on bung that's supposed to fit the Yamaha fuel package that goes in the original tank. So I'll be crossing over the 2 tanks, so it'll be 1 tank, but fuel gauge and all that will be in one of them. Other than that, you know, this stuff's pretty simple. You know, I'm looking at probably, you know, cutting this up and actually reusing these whole things onto a steering setup where they sit vertical instead of horizontal, like a handlebar setup. It appears that, you know, that shouldn't be a problem. You know, vertical and you're holding like this, you know, it's pretty natural to hit all the controls and run the boat that way. Haven't seen anything like that, but you know, there are other ways to do it. But on the older jet skis, you know, they actually had cables for throttle. There are different setups. You could use you know, cables going through you know, mechanisms and levers going through your steering column to go down back to the throttle. But this is all electronic. The throttle is like in a car where it just has a sensor on the foot pedal. So I just figured, you know, I don't really care how it looks. It might look kind of funky having these 2, you know, horizontal, you know, mounted into your steering wheel, but I don't really have a problem with it. So that's probably the way it's going to end up being. And anyway, I'm going to get to it, cut this top off. Just thought I'd make a video on some of these things. Definitely, if you're removing these bolts and these screws, if you can put a little bit of heat to them, it really makes it a lot easier to where it won't strip out. And we'll see you next video.